Cinema. It's a complex and thought-provoking art form that has, over the years, generated many well-acclaimed works of art. The Godfather, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Megan, all names that make us think of art pieces that invoke the most profound of emotions within our very souls. This was the world we all lived in for years, but things were soon to change. Something was coming, something big, something earth-shattering, a cinematic event that would change the movie-going landscape forever. A cinematic event called Barbenheimer. In case you were somehow not aware, July 21st, 2023 saw a historic moment in cinema history. Two movies, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer and Greta Gerwig's Barbie, were released on the same day. This event was foretold over a year ago when the studios publicly declared the release dates for these two movies, or should I say, release date. Now, if this announcement had not been made, perhaps the world could have been a completely different place. But it was, and is not. For you see, after this announcement was made, the internet took notice. Many people noted the contrast in tone and subject matter between the dark and depressing Oppenheimer and the hot pink glee of Barbie. And so, taking this comedic contrast, the internet did what it does best: meme the ever-loving shit out of it. It started with people simply poking fun at the contrast, simply joking about the two seemingly polar opposite movies and their proximity. Then people started joking that they would go to see the movies together as a double feature. A silly joke, a goof, a laugh, until it wasn't anymore. Until it became something greater. Needless to say, I was a participant in Barbenheimer 2023. I went and saw both movies as soon as I had a day off where I could watch both of them in one day. And now I bring you this video, which is probably already too late for the hype train, but god damn it, this is my channel. And I will do the funny videos whether you like it or not. When I want, where I want, with who I want. I'll do things with other people. Anyway, I saw both of these movies, and I went on this double feature. I laughed, I cried, and at the end of it all, I came out of the Cinemark theater a changed man. I had laid witness to one of the greatest, if not the greatest, cinematic pairing in the history of film. And what kind of journalist would I be if I didn't take notes on this historic moment to report on it all for the record books? For the most part, I will try to be spoiler-free for both of these movies since they are both in theaters, with a spoiler section towards the end of each review. But in the meantime, both of these movies are pretty explosive in their own ways. So sit back and enjoy the bombastic hit, Barbenheimer.
Meanwhile, I've mastered the atom more than any man alive. Now I'm here to split you like 2 and 3 from 5.
Alright, so let's start off with a bang. God, I'm so funny! Oppenheimer, named of course after Christopher Nolan's hitman brother, is an interesting movie. To be 100% honest with you, I was not planning on seeing Oppenheimer at all. I know that Christopher Nolan has a reputation, but I hadn't really been caught up in the hype train because I had only ever seen Inception once. And I've never been one who's been incredibly interested in war biopics, especially World War II biopics. Considering that it is a subject that is sometimes surrounded by intense personalities, let's just say. Plus, what limited knowledge I had of the man that the story was being told about made him seem like a bit of an ignorant and self-important prick, as well as a serial adulterer. But to be fair, that was pretty good for a dude for his time. So overall, this movie just didn't seem super interesting to me, and I had no real reason to watch it. That is, until the Barbenheimer movement grew into the massive phenomenon it became, and I will admit, I got a little swept up in the excitement of it all. So I decided to see both movies to complete the bit. And if there's one thing that I hope that no one will ever accuse me of, it's that I didn't commit hard enough to the bit. In order to familiarize myself with Christopher Nolan's style, I decided to watch the movie of his that interested me the most, Interstellar. I went in knowing nothing about this movie besides the fact that it had something to do with black holes and that Matthew McConaughey cried in it a bunch. And honestly, I liked it a lot. I've always been a fan of not too distant future science fiction, and this movie really scratched that itch for me. Plus, it really did a great job of selling the massive scale of the universe and of space travel. There are a few things that are a little bit silly and and potentially cringeworthy, but none of that really impacted my experience. Even the infamous "love is like gravity" speech actually really worked for me in the context. It was a solid movie, and it really got me excited to see Oppenheimer. When the day came and I finally did see Oppenheimer, it was something else. I don't mean that in a negative way, by the way. I do have my issues with this movie, but man, it was such a great watch. And as I said, no spoilers will be here until I otherwise specify, so let's get into the review as such. First things first, Oppenheimer is a pretty ballsy movie, in more ways than one. It's a movie that's pretty openly critical of the US government, and not in a, "oh, there's one evil general," or an, "oh, the military's incompetent" way. It points a spotlight on how some of the most celebrated figures in recent American history were pretty horrible people, particularly a certain US president and his cabinet. It also doesn't shy away from Oppenheimer's political views. For those of you who don't know, Oppenheimer was a known associate of communists and socialists well into at least the 1940s, and had expressed a intellectual interest in Marxist ideology. The movie doesn't shy away from that, and importantly, it doesn't demonize communists or communism like so much of US media is wont to do. It's a small step, but it's a noteworthy and interesting one nonetheless. I also feel as though it's worth mentioning the performances in this movie are great. Cillian Murphy, which I only just learned it's not pronounced Cillian Murphy, and I've been saying it wrong for literal years, is obviously phenomenal. People have been praising his performance up and down, and I'll just add this. The dude has really got the 1,000-yard stare down pat. I definitely believe that this is a man who is well aware that he has created unimaginable horror for millions in the present and future. But the other cast members also did really great. I know there's only going to be one thing that a lot of reviewers, particularly men, are going to talk about with Florence Pugh's character. Well, two things, technically. But her acting was, as to be expected from her previous performances, incredible. She absolutely shone in the 10 minutes of screen time that her character had on pure charisma alone. Emily Blunt was also very good, as were Matt Damon and all the various other cameos and nods. But the particular standout for me was Robert Downey Jr., who I think legitimately has a claim for next year's Best Supporting Actor Oscar. If they hold them. It seems as though in recent years Robert Downey Jr. has wanted to escape the giant Iron Man-shaped shadow looming over him, and has been less successful than his MCU co-star Chris Evans. Chris Evans had Knives Out and The Gray Man.
Why are you walking like that?
Because I got shot in the ass, Suzanne!
And RDJ had... oh. Ugh. But in this movie, I was actually pretty floored. For a little bit, I could only see Tony Stark, since that's who I've known him for, but his performance as Louis Strauss was actually really captivating. Just a nice little surprise from an actor that I've been familiar with for most of my life, and I thought I knew the full scope of, That's all. The score in this movie is utterly incredible. And I actually thought at first it was Hans Zimmer until friend of the channel Daniel Goldhorn actually pointed out that it was Ludwig, I'm going to horrifically mispronounce this, but Göransson? I don't know. Good on you, Ludwig. Or Ludwig. I'm not really an expert on music or pronunciation, clearly, but I can definitely give this OST my seal of approval, if that means anything at all. And of course, the main thing that has been talked about during the discussion around the movie, besides the Barbenheimer effect, has been the audio-visual experience. It's been hyped up for months that you have to experience the movie in 420K Ultra HD film reel with a double duplex D speakers or whatever, so that just every single molecule of your body can feel the movie go, "It's Heiming time," and Heim all over the place. And having seen it, I saw it in what my theater calls premium large format, which I think is basically just IMAX under a different name, but let me tell you, this movie was an experience in the theaters. I'll say more in the spoiler section, but yep, definitely something I recommend seeing in theaters. Now, of course, this movie wasn't perfect. Regarding the actual movie itself, I felt that the editing was a bit erratic and all over the place. Literally, since the movie jumped around the timeline way too much. I'm not saying I can't understand nonlinear storying, because I can. I'm really smart and cool, and I do like it when it's used well, but it was exhausting to jump back and forth over the course of 40 years every 10 minutes for 3 hours. Feels like it could have been streamlined at least a little bit. I also feel as though the tackling of the subject matter could have been better. A lot of people have pointed out in the discourse around this movie that a lot of people of color were negatively affected by Oppenheimer's work in horrifically negative ways. Not just the populations of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also the Native American residents of the area of New Mexico where the Manhattan Project was being worked on, who still tell stories about having to boil the radiation out of their drinking water and having relatives die due to radiation poisoning. So making the movie mostly about the white guy who felt guilty for doing it might be a bit in poor taste. I'm not saying the movie itself needs to pivot to focus on those victims for the majority of the runtime, though, it definitely wouldn't hurt to do a little bit more of that, since it is meant to be told from Oppenheimer's perspective. But perhaps we should take a step back and examine the fact that this is the story that we chose to tell first instead. And of course, my final critique, it was really weird when Roderick came in and told Oppenheimer that he was late for school in the middle of the night by changing his clock. It was a bit of a weird crossover and a tone shift that I don't think really worked, especially once the movie completely pivoted to be about Oppenheimer helping Roderick to get his band to win the Battle of the Bands contest at the local community center. Okay, so I'm going to talk for a little bit about spoilers. So if you want to avoid that, here is a time code to skip to, or there should be some down in the description below. Cool. So the bomb dropping scene was one of the most harrowing and spectacular experiences I've ever had in a movie theater. The build-up was absolutely incredible, and the payoff, well, it was some of the most bone-chilling shit that someone can see. I don't really have anything else to say about it, really. That scene alone in the theater is worth the price of admission. On that note, while I criticize the movie for not examining the effects on the nuke victims as much as they could have, I do really like what they did do in the movie. The scene where Oppenheimer hallucinates the ashen remains of the victims of Hiroshima like their Pompeii residents while giving a victory speech is absolutely incredible, as was the scene where the participants in the Manhattan Project are shown the results of the bombings on a slideshow. And I like the bit where, when the US cabinet members are deciding which Japanese cities to drop the bombs on, one of the members rules out Kyoto because he and his wife had gone on honeymoon there. It's just such a casual demonstration of the cognitive dissonance and dehumanization that needs to take place to commit such a heinous act. Anyway, yeah, spoiler time over. This movie really was something that surprised me, and I'm glad that I chose to watch it. It's such a haunting exploration of the dangers and lengths humanity will go to just to achieve greatness. And it absolutely takes advantage of the medium of film to do so. It's just a shame that they actually did have to drop a nuke on Los Angeles to really go the extra mile and avoid using CGI. Just a weird choice. Like, I get committing to the bit, but it's a nuke on Los Angeles. Alright, now the kids are done talking about their movie. It's time for the serious adult's turn. Okay, so this movie is legitimately amazing, and I think it's probably better than Oppenheimer. And with that move, he's already got all the dude bros in the comments angry, ladies and gentlemen. Look at the efficiency of that play. My god, I have not seen such efficiency since Walker's wall maneuver. But man, this movie rocked. There's honestly just so much to love and talk about that I don't know if I'll even scratch the surface. But I'll try. I think the first place to start off is with how it looks. This movie is visually stunning, and it 100% looks like a movie that caused an international pink paint shortage. Outside of the hot pink look, I also just loved how this movie really committed to the plastic side of things in Barbie Land. There's the obvious stuff like the cups and showers not having any actual water, and the ambulance being a fold-out truck with printed on decals for shelves. But I also noticed that all of the characters in Barbie Land have an almost unnaturally smooth skin, like their pores had been digitally removed or something. I really love the commitment to that aesthetic, how it contrasts with the real world, and how Mattel headquarters kind of blended the two. One thing that this movie has in common with Oppenheimer is that the performances are absolutely top-notch. My friend Evan Magid says that he thinks Margot Robbie is better cast in this than she is as Harley Quinn, and honestly, I think I agree. She really sells this role without a hint of irony, which I think would have ruined the tone that they were going for. That's something I can say with most of the cast in regards to committing to the bit. The only real exception is the teenage girl character that's in this, but that kind of comes with the territory, so I don't mind. She does great as well, and so does her mom, played by America Ferrera. I don't think her character is in any of the trailers, so I won't talk about her too much here, but she is great. Michael Cera, Issa Rae, Simu Liu, Will Ferrell, and all of the other people cameoing also did great, including I think the cop guy from Andor, who was there, I'm pretty sure. But there is one performance that everybody is talking about, and I would be remiss if I didn't give it at least one mention. Yes, of course, Ryan Gosling as Ken steals the show in basically every scene that he's in. I mean, come on, you knew he was going to. He was already stealing the show in all the promotional material in this movie. Did you really think that was going to change?
Books are important. Unfortunately, I just have book, but if you had more than one, you would have books. Books are better, preferably ones about horses.
His Kenergy was just sublime. He was just absolutely hilarious in this movie, and I would watch a million more live-action Barbie movies if he stayed as Ken. Wild to think that the showdown for Best Supporting Actor this year could really come down to these two. Speaking of comedy, the movie was legitimately one of the funniest movies I've watched in a long time. Usually when I'm watching a comedy in a theater, I tend to just lightly exhale out my nose or giggle if I'm feeling into it. But I don't know if it was just the energy of the crowd I was with, because I was with a great crowd. The theater was packed full of people all dressed up to see this movie. The dude next to me was dressed just like Ken, bleached blonde hair and all. But I found myself laughing out loud multiple times during the movie. One thing that really got to me was how the Barbies and Kens talked like how children think adults talked. The phrases brewski beers and Mojo Dojo Casa House are burned into my brain. At the same time, there were some not at all subtle adult jokes that I really got a kick out of, like when Kate McKinnon's character talked about Ken's genderless blob. It's great. This movie wasn't just a happy-go-lucky comedy movie though. A lot of it certainly is like that, but the movie also digs pretty deeply into larger issues. If you've heard political discourse around this movie already, you've probably heard about how it digs into some issues of feminism and patriarchy. So of course, people reacted normally.
Things that Greta Gerwig hates according to this self-expose. Men, male fringes, horses, the Godfather films, the concept of love, men.
And we get people like the right's best rapper, Ben Shapiro, making a 43-minute long video destroying the movie. Almost as hard as Barbie is destroying international box office records. And as much as I did your mother. Anyway, my point is that this movie digs into those themes in really interesting ways, and really meaningful ways too. I'll dig into it more in the spoilers section, but it was a really nice surprise. The music in this movie is also really memorable. I'm very hit or miss on established singers making albums for movies, but this one hit pretty well for the most part. Of course though, the skills of Billie Eilish and Ice Spice can hold a candle to the pipes of Ken.
'Cause I'm just Ken.
I'm gonna be so insufferable about this song come awards show seasons, aren't I? However, despite all signs to the contrary, this movie isn't perfect. I felt that some of the elements included were a bit superfluous or overused. For example, Will Ferrell and his band of executives were fun for a bit, but they were pretty one note and slightly overstayed their welcome in my opinion. As much as I loved Ken, I do wish that his arc in the movie didn't overshadow Barbie so much. Her arc is good, but it's pretty vaguely defined for most of the movie, and you don't really know what she wants until near the end. I don't know, it works, but it could have been done better. And as for the more political messaging, some of it felt a tad clunky. I realize that is my own limited perspective, but it does feel a tad overstated in some scenes, not really at all subtle. Then again though, there were a sizable amount of people who interpreted the message as quote-unquote anti-men, so maybe they were being a bit too subtle for those folks. Alright, let's do some spoiler talk. Time code up there, or you can look in the description, yada 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 yada. You get the gist. Cool. So the Kendom arc was absolutely hysterical. I already mentioned brewski beers and Mojo Dojo Casa houses, but I'm also partial to long-term low-commitment distance casual girlfriend. He just has such a way with words. And the fascination with and confusion about horses? Perfection. On a more serious note, the whole Kendom patriarchy arc serves as a great metaphor for how boys and young men are fed into indoctrination by things like the alt-right pipeline and Andrew Tate and Ben Shabibo himself. The idea that this movie is anti-men is fundamentally missing the point that the movie is making, i.e. that the idea of patriarchy is harmful to women and men, and that men aren't bad people for buying into a system that tells them that they're cool and are validated, when that same system has told them that they're worthless if they express emotion. It all comes back to toxic masculinity, fellas. But the other main message, one that I can't really relate to as much, but I still had an appreciation for, was just how the movie celebrated femininity and womanhood even as it joked about how much it's put down. And while the movie wasn't really about this specifically, it was nice to see that this movie takes steps to include all women, including trans and disabled women. Turf repellent, that one. But the entire ending, where Barbie is initially afraid of getting things like cellulite, but then she goes out into the real world and gets a taste of life and all of its highs and lows, she stops worrying about that. She tearfully tells an old woman that she's beautiful. She gains an appreciation for life, and she wants to live and help be a part of the species that creates ideas. And hey, is someone chopping onions in here? I love this. It's so much like another one of my favorite movies, Soul. I absolutely love this movie so much, you guys. It's such a treat. I really don't have a whole lot else to add to that besides it's awesome. Loved it, love it. All right, spoiler talk over. All in all, throughout the highs and very, very lows of the discussions being had online, I think that there's one thing we can all agree on. How the hell did Mattel let Greta Gerwig get away with this movie? Dude, I'm not complaining, but there is so much stuff in here that I do not feel like should have gotten past their radar. I do wonder if anyone at Mattel actually read the script or not. God bless clueless CEOs.
I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world, life in plastic.
And now here we are at the end of the movie era. We had two pretty great movies that joined forces and combined to become an unstoppable cinematic event. And now it's time to pack up our bags and go home. Cinema has peaked, and Hollywood is shut down anyway. On a serious note, as the actors and writers strike continue in Hollywood, I think movies like these really emphasize just how important it is to have good actors and writers. Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach, Christopher Nolan, Margot Robbie, Cillian Murphy, Ryan Gosling, and hundreds of other creatives and artists are the reasons that these movies are what they are, not Warner Brothers Discovery or Universal. And the fact that studio execs think that they're important enough and that the actors and writers are this disposable just shows that they're really stupid. This video isn't about the strikes, but it wouldn't be possible without the union members dedicating themselves to making great art and fighting for their right to make that art a livable wage. So I dedicate this video and all future videos made during the strike to those creatives. Godspeed. And thank you all for watching. I'm not going to do my whole spiel, you know the drill. All my social media and Patreon links are in the description. It would be great if you liked and commented and subscribed to help keep the algorithm at bay. I genuinely feel thankful for all of you watching and all of your support. And the way that things are moving in the entertainment industry makes me feel like I actually have a shot at attaining something there. At making a livable career out of doing what I love. And it's really exciting. I sincerely hope I made your day just that little bit better. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
I did not care for The Godfather.
What?
Did not care for The Godfather.
How can you even say that, Dad?
Didn't like it.